Episode 63, Detour 365. William, your host here with Bill and Nathaniel and others who you might hear.
Susie and Laurel and Pepper.
Oh, no. You need to give away your identity.
I don't know. I should maybe see no.
So we're in Daniel chapter 3. And this is still the Humanity of God series, where we're looking at theophanies, or appearances of God in the Old Testament, mainly where God takes human form, but also we're looking at instances where God shows some sort of emotion, or it's presented as that way, some sort of human-like trait. We're examining why God manifests in these different ways. And so we've been going in chronological order. Now we were at kind of the beginning of the exile period, looking at the book of Ezekiel last week, and now we are in the part of the exile period and Daniel. And why are we looking at this passage in particular? Well, there's a lot of relevance to today and our experience as Christians today. Especially this exile period in Babylon, and this whole idea of being a sojourner and being part of God's kingdom, being in the world but not of the world, and also this, even though this is an ancient story, and when we think of Babylon, we think of an ancient kingdom, and it was, but there's a lot to be said here about the struggles and choices that we face today in the modern world. And it points to how God is with us in all times, and especially in the difficult and challenging times. And of course, it's part of this series because we have this appearance of God takes a form and I don't want to give away the story if you don't know. The story of Daniel chapter 3 and the 3 guys that get thrown in the fire. So you'll see why this is part of the series here. So to give some context, chapter 1, we're introduced to Daniel and his 3 friends who have been taken captive as Babylon has taken Jerusalem, and they've hauled off some people, and Daniel and the 3 people we'll see here in the chapter we're reading, they were mostly from noble families, and they had some sort of, I don't know what kind of test Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian, gave them, but they evidently were seen to have promise, so he wanted some of these people in his court, so they were being trained to be part of his royal set of advisors, basically. And in chapter 1, they have this whole thing where they resolve not to defile themselves by eating the food from the king's table, because the food was likely sacrificed to idols. And so they chose to not do that. That's a fascinating story there. So they just chose to eat vegetables. So they took a stand, basically, in chapter 1. And in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And in this dream, he dreams of a statue. And Daniel interprets this dream, not only interprets the dream, but he says, you need to tell me what the dream was and interpret it. And this is a vision of the kingdoms that are to come, including the current kingdom, Babylon. It's a statue, and the head's made out of gold, the chest and torso are made out of silver. Mm-hmm. The thighs are made out of bronze. And anyway, as you go down the statue, then you get to iron, legs of iron, and then feet of iron and clay, and then the toes are made of iron and clay. So the kingdoms are cut. So you start out with the head of gold. So Babylon, basically at its height, and then that's replaced by another kingdom, which is replaced by another kingdom, and then eventually a stone hits the statue and it crumbles down, and that's The stone is a sign of God's kingdom, which becomes established. So this has a lot to do actually with this this chapter, as we'll see here, because we're looking at another statue, and I don't think it's an accident that Nebuchadnezzar makes a statue of gold after Daniel reveals this dream. So he kind of misses the point of this dream, which is to say that the kingdoms and the empires of the world are going to come and go, but God's kingdom always remains. And so here we are in chapter 3. Daniel, I think, is absent from this chapter. He's not mentioned in this chapter. It's just the three, his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Bill is reading.
The complete Jewish Bible.
Uh-oh. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And we have a brass giraffe right here as a little prop for our statue.
Yes.
We're talking about statue.
Appropriate.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Any words you want to define or anything before?
No, I think really this is pretty straightforward. There are
All right.
a few different.
Are the names the same?
Some of the names are different, but if they're people are reading along, it's names of kingdoms and countries, but they will show up to be different, and people will pick that up as we go through the text, and that should be relatively straightforward.
Just closing the door there, so we'll really get some good acoustics.
Thank you, sir. Chapter 3 of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, had a gold statue made, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, which he set upon the plain of Dura in the province of Babel. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, summoned the viceroys, prefects, governors, judges, treasurers, counselors, sheriffs, and all the provincial officials to assemble and come to the dedication of the statue which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. The viceroys, prefects, governors, judges, treasurers, counselors, sheriffs, and all the provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the statue which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. They stood in front of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and a herald proclaimed, "Peoples, national languages, you are ordered that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, zither, lute, bagpipe, and the rest of the musical instruments, you fall down and worship the gold statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship is to be thrown immediately into a blazing hot furnace." Therefore, when all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, zither, lute, and the rest of the musical instruments, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. But then some Kazim approached and began denouncing the Jews. They said to Nebuchadnezzar the king, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty, you have ordered that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, zither, lute, bagpipe, and the rest of the musical instruments is to fall down and worship the gold statue, and that whoever does not fall down and worship is to be thrown into a blazing hot furnace. There are some Jews whom you have put in charge of the affairs of the province of Babel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these men, your Majesty, have paid no attention to you. They do not serve your gods, and they do not worship the gold statue you set up. In a raging fury, Nebuchadnezzar ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. When the men had been brought before the king, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, is it true that you neither serve my gods nor worship the gold statue I set up? All right then, if you are prepared, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, zither, lute, bagpipe, and the rest of the musical instruments, to fall down and worship the gold statue, very well. But if you won't worship, you will immediately be thrown into a blazing hot furnace. And what God will save you from my power then? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, your question doesn't require an answer from us. Your Majesty, if our God, whom we serve, is able to save us, he will save us from the blazing hot furnace and from your power. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will neither serve your gods nor worship the gold statue which you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar became so utterly enraged that his face was distorted with anger against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace made 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing hot furnace. So these men were tied up in their cloaks, tunics, robes, and other clothes, and thrown into the blazing hot furnace. The king's order was so urgent and the furnace so overheated that the men carrying Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were burned to death by the flame. These 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell, bound into the blazing hot furnace. Suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar sprang to his feet. Alarmed, he asked his advisors, didn't we throw 3 men bound into the flames? They answered the king, yes, of course, Your Majesty. But he exclaimed, look, I see 4 men, not tied up, walking around in there in the flames, unhurt. And the 4th looks like one of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the blazing hot furnace and said, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, you servants of El Elyon, come out and come here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego emerged from the flames. The viceroys, prefects, governors, and royal advisors who were there saw that the fire had no power on the bodies of these men. Not even their hair was singed. Their clothes looked the same, and they didn't smell of fire. Nebuchadnezzar said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to deliver his servants who trusted in him. They defied the royal order to the point of being willing to give up their bodies in order not to serve or worship any god but their own God. Therefore, I herewith decree that anyone, no matter from which people, nation, or language, who says anything to insult the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is to be torn limb from limb, and his house is to be reduced to rubble, because there is no other God who can save like this. Then the king gave Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego higher rank in the province of Babylon. The following letter was sent out from Nebuchadnezzar the king to all the peoples, nations, and languages living throughout the earth. Shalom Rav, or abundant peace. I am pleased to recount the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how powerful his wonders. His kingdom lasts forever, and he rules all generations.
Is that it?
That's it.
Did you read into chapter 4?
No, that's the end of Daniel 3 as I have it.
Oh, I had, then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I must have not copied the
Well,
whole.
that's just
Oh, well.
that's just as my version has the end of 3.
Oh, 33. Read to 30. Never mind. Okay. You were in the right.
In my version.
Well.
Tom says that too, that it got a promotion.
Yeah. And then the chapter 4 begins with the letter Nebuchadnezzar sends out.
Oh, well, you see, different versions are sliced up slightly differently.
And chapter 4 is interesting because that is apparently written by Nebuchadnezzar himself, about the account of his he didn't learn his lesson from this story here.
Not very well.
No, but he did eventually. So
that's another story.
That is another story. But I wanted to, well, the men in the, so it's clear that this fourth man in the fire looked like, had a human form, but also looked different. Because he said, in my translation, it says like a son of the gods.
Yes.
So a glorified version of a human form.
Yes.
But we're not given much else other than that. But it's at least my belief that this was one of those pre-incarnate appearances of Jesus in the Old Testament, which we have looked at several of them because we're in this series here. So the big idea here, and I want to start trying to begin with a big idea. We're about big ideas.
Yeah.
God is with us. Well, at all times, but in the fire, his presence sustains us through life's trials. And this whole idea that to frame the challenges, not that we should seek out, gotta be careful because the challenges will come. You don't have to make your life harder than it needs. The challenge, God, when you're following God, you will go into challenges. You will have times where it's really apparent that you need to rely on God's help and provision to get through. I'm not saying to purposefully walk down a dark alley at night
don't
wearing high heels, or something. Don't provoke, don't invite.
Don't poke the bear.
Don't poke the bear. Yeah, but if the bear comes at you,
Be prepared.
stand your ground.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. And those circumstances God uses to allow us to both grow and also to experience God in a unique way that we wouldn't otherwise get to experience. And some of that comes out of, I often wish that we could experience God in this unique way without the challenge. But we've talked in the past about this whole idea of needing, we phrased it different ways, like needing urgency or needing some sort of stimulus to, it's almost like God knows what we need, to get us out of our comfort zone, because we can become complacent too, if we don't have any kind of, if we try to stay in comfort and avoid all challenges, we can become complacent. And but if we are faithful and we seek to follow God and maintain that path with integrity, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we'll run into situations where you're going to stand out. You're going to be not necessarily thrown into a fiery furnace, but maybe a fiery furnace of a different kind. And
we are going to have opportunities,
yes,
to show that we belong to our God.
And the whole imagery of the fire too. Fire is used for testing, is symbolic of testing and purifying too. So going through the fire isn't a bad thing because you come out purified. Yeah. And doesn't it say in one of Paul's letters that once when our life is over and we go on and our works get tested or something with fire, anything we that just came to me. I didn't have time to look up the exact passage, but like even if you're saved, even if you go, for lack of a better way of saying, even if you're in heaven, you're what you did still gets, whether you did it for God or what you did with your life and your anyway, it's just an image of being tested by fire.
I cannot say that I remember that, but that kind of image certainly makes sense.
What he has made will burn up, and he will suffer loss, but he'll be saved through the flames, or something like that. But there's some
the things that we have done for the things that we have done for Jesus will be winnowed out. All of our deeds will go through the sieve, and the ones we have done for Christ will remain and be shown. Whether it be tested by fire or something else. I mean, those things are going to
faith kind of has to
rise to the top.
Faith kind of, you don't really know your faith until it's tested, right?
Well,
you can say that you feel that you have your faith, but I was kind of wondering about this statement that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego made. God can deliver us, but even if He doesn't,
yes,
we still won't bow down to the statue. But I've always kind of wondered about including that, but even if He doesn't, we still won't,
Well, that's
I mean,
important.
Does it show more faith to say that versus, even if you throw us in there, God's going to deliver us. We know God's going to deliver us. But...
Well, we don't know that God's going to deliver us. Yeah. We don't know that that's part of God's plan. We don't know. We don't know God's plan in the overall scheme of things. It may be for us to be delivered. It may be for us not to be delivered. We know that He can deliver us. So part of the plan, cool.
Yeah.
If it's not, cool. So to live is Christ, to die is Christ. He's with us all the time.
Yeah.
And if we die, we're out of this rat race.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, yeah. I mean, their physical bodies would just be destroy.
And then we would be out of this craziness.
And it's kind of a minor thing, but making the fire extra hot. I know there's the whole 7 times hotter is probably an expression, because the Bible uses 7 and means.
Well, it said he ordered it, but it never said that they met that standard.
Oh, yeah.
I guarantee you they did not.
Yeah, they couldn't have made it hotter than, I think of.
Well, it's hot enough to kill the guys that they're usually portrayed as big, muscular.
It's awful stinking hot.
Yeah.
But if it's fire already, about the lowest temperature fire you can have is 500 degrees.
Yeah, and these, I don't know, would have been kilns or smelting furnaces, I would guess, for let's see, Nebuchadnezzar would have been, I don't know that they were in the Iron Age. They could have made.
Well, iron
bronze.
was mentioned in the statue, but I don't know if they could.
I'm
Make
thinking it must
iron,
have been like a
yeah.
kiln or something, if they had fired brick.
Well, certainly that. I was just wondering if they could have made iron. That would have probably been the hottest furnace that they could have created.
Well, the statue in chapter 2 has iron,
Yeah,
and it talks about the strength of iron and all that, but maybe they couldn't make iron at scale or, melt it down and control it very well. I'm guessing.
well, that's true. So you probably
require a lot more heat to
um
work than
Yeah.
bronze and
yeah, it would require more heat. They could probably make iron, and so that meant they could make iron swords and spear tips and that sort of thing. Perhaps wheels for their chariots, and
that kind of thing.
that's probably what they would have used iron for first.
Well, the Romans, though, that was more of a Roman. The Romans are more associated with like iron and the Iron Age. But maybe the ages don't really have anything to do with what you think of the Greeks and the Bronze Age, and this is like kind of at the beginning of the Bronze Age. Because this is before the Greeks come in and
Yeah.
take over the place.
I don't know. I had never thought about that. Just awful stinking hot.
It's hot, yeah.
Um,
But wouldn't that just kill them fast? I mean, being thrown in a furnace might not be the worst way to go in the ancient world.
yeah. I mean, if they would have tumbled into the furnace, tied up, they would have died very quickly.
Yeah. But it makes note that it wasn't that they kind of survived, like their hair wasn't singed, their clothes weren't, they didn't smell of smoke. So this was like kind of an indisputable sign, an indisputable miracle.
They were in there with someone else.
Yeah.
They were no longer bound, and they were in there with someone else. And they were just wandering around. The king could see them wandering around. What do you think they would have been doing in the furnace?
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder, if God imparted anything to them while they were in there, or, because we're just given this side of the story. It doesn't say, they don't come out and give an account of like God told us this while we were in the furnace, you know.
Any ideas?
Oh, I've always believed that they were conversing with Christ.
Yeah. Conversing, but they never shared what they were told. How selfish.
I have a sense of how long they were in there either.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that, of course, I've never thought about any of this, but why were they walking around? I mean, why were they just kind of like standing there saying, we're not being consumed by fire because our God is saving us? So I don't know, that's interesting that they would be moving about.
Hmm.
Well, they're more visible that way,
Yeah.
and motion attracts.
Well, I guess it shows they were unbound. You know, it's like,
That's true.
maybe
Yeah.
that's why.
Just conversing,
Yeah.
walking around, nothing was bothering them.
Yeah.
But it does say they were walking around, at least in my version, it says they were walking around there in the flames,
Yeah.
unhurt. There in verse 25. But he exclaimed, look, I see 4 men not tied up, walking around there in the flames, unhurt, and the 4th looks like one of the gods.
Yeah, notices that too. I see 4 men walking around freely in the fire, completely unharmed. And the 4th man looks like a son of the gods. Yeah.
Oh.
Is there any version significantly different?
I wish I had printed out multiple versions of this, and you'll probably go on the Bible Hub.
You have the message. Is the message?
I was researching tested by fire. Fire in the Bible is a symbol of purification and refinement. Kind of see your true quality, the measure of a person. 1 Corinthians 3:13 says, each one's work will become evident because the day will reveal it, or it will be disclosed by fire, and the fire will try each one's work of what sort it is.
So that was the thing that was what I was thinking about.
Well, in 1 Peter, it says, the trial of your faith, which is more precious than gold that perishes, so tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So, mentioned several times.
The King James has that verse as he answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God.
That's actually more clear.
Yeah, the what is this translation called? Modern English version also says, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God.
And who was it who said this? Was this Nebuchadnezzar?
Yes.
So there are many instances, as we know throughout history, where people weren't still in. I mean, we kind of see that also in the Book of Acts. Some people get set free from prison, some people, get stoned. It's kind of, but everything kind of has a purpose for God's plan. I don't know. I mean, how do we wrestle with that? I know it's kind of a like, well, if my time's up, my time's up. It's God's call on that, but I still wonder.
I think it has to do with the example that God wants to set
Yeah.
for a particular audience.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because this story has lived on, and it's part of me thinks that they were delivered so we get this story and this example. You know, Nebuchadnezzar saw it.
and that makes me think this particular story and message was intended for a group of individuals that did not believe.
Because it was such a dramatic sign. And well, also, I guess Nebuchadnezzar was somebody that needed to see this, perhaps.
Well,
Yeah.
well, what's the takeaway from that? That as far as no, I can, like I keep hearing my own echo in my. I had my phone set up so that I could move around, but are people only going to be saved or yeah, saved from circumstances such as this when it's used to spread a message? Because certainly the vast majority of Christians that have made that same choice, which I'm sure many have, and no one knows their names throughout history, it seems that 99.99% of people do just die.
Well, there are many stories, and again, these are the people that survive, of course, but they have stories of making it out of some sort of crazy situation.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are some stories out there, but if you think of how many stories there might be compared to how many Christians have probably been prosecuted for their faith.
Well, I guess like in the medieval times, you know, all the people that.
Well, even today, people of the faith trying to escape China.
But there are some people that are successful, you know. That,
Yeah, but I mean, I think that each particular instance
has a special purpose.
Has a special purpose, and its result is for a particular effect on the audience that receives the news.
I mean, it does seem like, I mean, not only seem like, but God prioritizes the eternal big plan, you know. Well, I guess that's kind of is the theme of Daniel, because, you know, this exile period, temporary, and you have the Babylonians that are, and then the Medes and the Persians come in and take over. And, you know, you kind of see this with the statue, the empires come and go, and God raises, especially in chapter 4, it talks, you know, that this theme gets repeated with Nebuchadnezzar saying, you know, the Lord raises up, whom he wills, and, you know, brings down whom he wills. And
well, actually, as I think about it, I think maybe this whole story of Daniel was early in the whole exile time. I think Daniel was in the first run, because there were 3 runs on Jerusalem, and they took I thought they took the king and the elite of the aristocrats and all that at the first time, and then they took stuff from the temple and a bunch of people the second time, and Ezekiel went at that time. And then the third time, they took the rest of what was there and destroyed the temple and took the rest of it. And that was in, I don't know, whatever it was, 567 or.
Well, my source I was consulting had this happen,
Okay.
but I don't know. My source might be wrong.
Well, probably not.
The internet's
I'm
never
shaky at that.
wrong. The internet's never wrong.
You are probably correct in that.
But Daniel's around for a long time. I mean, he's around pretty much the whole.
He
Exile.
makes it until after
Does it say the King Cyrus or something?
he makes it until the Persians take power.
Yeah.
So
How many
he was,
rulers? 4? Because it's Nebuchadnezzar, then his son.
yeah,
Then you have Darius,
and
the
then
Mede, and then Cyrus, the Mede.
Persian.
Are the Medes and the Persians, are they the same?
No,
Kind of
they
thrown
were
together.
they were allies.
Ah,
They were, but yeah, they were allies. They weren't the same.
uh,
And the Persians were the stronger of the two.
yeah.
But they,
But they were
Didn't
kind of
wanna-
included in that silver part of the statue.
Yeah.
The Greeks were apparently the bronze. And then the Romans were supposed to be the iron. Some would say we're the toads, but I don't know.
there are, there are interpretations on that, but
You're the pinky toe, or
yeah.
we're America, we're the big toe. Yeah.
I don't know about that. We're not so big. We're only, what is it, 360
Well, that's true.
million or something.
Yeah.
India is the big one in the world now. They have the most people.
They do.
Um,
But I guess, it's kind of this, if you view a chart or those maps that show kind of the rise and fall of different empires and countries, you don't stay on top forever. Somebody always kind of comes and replaces, moves into the slot, but it's always this.
Someone is always on the way up.
Yeah.
And someone is always has been up.
Yeah.
Um,
But then it's interesting how, and I was gonna bring this up in a little bit, but well, actually, let me hold on to that. I was gonna mention how
okay.
tying this into Jesus and the kingdom of God, but I did want to mention in this whole concept, and we're going to talk about this in greater detail next time, because this has to do with I'm going to include this as a theophany because I just find it an interesting story. The hand writing on the wall.
Oh, that's the next time.
Yeah, but it's Nebuchadnezzar's son, and it's interesting how his downfall is
Next time.
Yeah, but you just see this anyway. Daniel sees the rise and fall of all these different kings and emperors.
Well, that's true. That's true. And Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar about all this, and Nebuchadnezzar just really doesn't understand.
Well, it seems like he understands maybe at the end of chapter 4, after he goes mad and all that.
Yeah.
Gets restored, but why did God have? Because it does seem like God gives Nebuchadnezzar a chance or a few chances, and I find that interesting. Of course, the focus of the story is the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but what is it about You know, and again, it could just be that God is using Nebuchadnezzar for God's purposes, and that it's not necessarily that Nebuchadnezzar is a good guy. I mean, he is sharper than his son. You know, he's definitely a more competent ruler, but you know, he's the head of gold in the statue. He's kind of, God puts him there as the leader of Babylon at the height of the empire, and you know, he has these guys thrown into the furnace, you know, but God allows him, you know, God doesn't strike him down like he strikes the sun down, obviously.
And what,
Go on.
and why does Nebuchadnezzar choose the fiery furnace? Why
Yeah.
not go into the lions?
Yeah, well, that's true. Daniel does get thrown to a line.
Yeah, right.
We'll talk about
Yeah, we'll
that.
talk.
Will we talk about that? Is that
I
on
don't
the
think
list?
so.
I don't
Maybe
think
we
so.
could throw it. Well, we're trying to get to
That's not really a theophany.
no, but and also like I think I had timed it so that we would be in the New Testament by the time of like Palm
Easter.
Sunday and Easter.
Okay.
So we're kind of coming to the last. Easter's how many weeks from now? It's the end of April. It's 3-4 weeks.
Maybe 3. Let's
3 weeks
see.
to Palm Sunday, right?
Let's see. 1, 2.
Uh,
No. Well,
3 weeks.
for
to Easter.
Sunday's the 30th.
Easter Sunday's the
No, this coming Sunday is the
coming
30th.
Sunday's the 30th.
And then 3 weeks from Sunday is Easter.
So it's four Sundays from now.
4 Sundays from now, counting tomorrow. Because this isn't Friday. You're throwing us by this being Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 3 weeks from tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
You got
Darn.
the 6th, the 13th, and the 20th of April.
3 weeks ago, I should have reminded myself it was 6 weeks to Sunday, and I could have had some kind of comment about that. But, oh well.
But
Anyway, 3 weeks. So next time will be the hand, and then another one, and then so maybe.
one thing about Nebuchadnezzar is I think God uses him as an example. We see Nebuchadnezzar as someone who sees and then backslides,
Yeah,
and then sees and then backslides.
but there's a stark contrast between him and his son. The way God deals with his son, it's like you're just worthless.
Well, yeah.
You know,
Nebuchadnezzar, though,
it's like almost like God thinks there's hope for him, or I don't know if it.
well, he's using Nebuchadnezzar to illustrate that people can grasp the truth.
Yeah.
Which Nebuchadnezzar did twice.
Yeah.
He saw that God was all powerful twice. I don't think he did 3 times. Twice.
Well, Daniel told him the dream and interpreted it.
Yeah.
He saw the fire,
And the fire.
and then he gets a dream, another dream that Daniel interprets, and he goes mad.
And
he realizes,
he came out of the craziness.
Yeah.
But did he accept God as all powerful at the end of the craziness?
I think so, yeah. Because at the end of and this is chapter 4, but it deals with our theme here.
I don't remember. I haven't read that in a long time.
So Nebuchadnezzar writes chapter 4 after he comes out of the craziness.
Right.
And says, "It seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation."
Okay. So Nebuchadnezzar See, God used Nebuchadnezzar to show that someone far removed, some pagan king far removed, could come to know and embrace the truth, because he saw God and backslid, saw God and backslid, saw God and embraced the truth conclusively.
Oh, and this is also interesting. He said, at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes and my reason returned. I bless the Most High God and praise and honor him who lives forever. His dominion, everlasting dominion, his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the hosts of heaven and all the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? But there's a there's but there's also the angel or something says to Nebuchadnezzar in the vision, till you, because it was one of the conditions for him to come out of the craziness, he had to realize that I just had it here. A watcher driven from men. Where was it? It said, and he, the Holy One, a watcher. The Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men. So that's what he had to. He had to realize that God put him there, that he was just not really any different than anybody else.
You know, that's something that,
because Daniel warned him, don't be prideful, and then he was, a year later, Nebuchadnezzar finally was walking along his palace on the roof or whatever, and looked out and saw the city, and he's like, look at this great city I've built myself. And,
yeah.
Then he lost his mind.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's something to help us remember to not be cocky.
now, would that injure his pride too? Like this whole spectacle of, he makes this giant statue, and even if it isn't solid gold, it's gold plated, and it's 90 feet tall, and he has everybody gather around and bow down to it, and there are these three guys that, defy his orders.
Yeah.
That would be kind of like he almost had to throw him in the fire. I mean,
Well, he certainly had thrown him in fire.
Yeah.
But he learned a lesson from it.
Yeah.
He learned a lesson about God from it. At which time he would have torn that golden image down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a little while later, he was just, again, he got a little time. It had been peaceful.
Yeah.
It had been peaceful. He had been raking in the bucks. Things had been great. He was walking around looking at things, and then he said, was walking there, and oh, look what I done. And God jerked him up by his bootstraps and said, look what you've done.
Yeah.
go
Why do-
crazy.
Why do people make the same mistake over and over again in the Bible and in our own lives?
We do it all day long.
Yeah,
We do it all, every one of us. We do
Yeah.
it all.
but why is that mechanism? I mean, I guess it's just fallen nature, or just the fact that we're not.
Free will. Some people will say free will. Very
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, even Solomon. I mean, Solomon was the prime example. I mean, awareness helps, but it's almost like it's something you have to remember all the time.
Well, it is something we have to remember all the time. But if we are indeed doing as Paul suggests, talking to God all the time,
Yeah,
it's a trap into which we will not fall,
yeah,
because the Holy Spirit will remind us that we are not, we are not at the top of the totem pole. We are created.
yeah,
I think a lot of people tend to believe that there is, and society, modern science, so a lot of things filter into it. They want to believe that they want to believe that we are not created, that we came to be here spontaneously, and that we are completely masters of our own.
Yeah.
That worked. But
well, in a sense, I mean, we're given free will, but we're not masters of our own destiny. I mean, that's.
well, are we masters of our own ship?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Well, you can be, but it's not going to go where you want it to go. You can try to be, but it's not.
It's not the road to heaven.
It's not. You have to give the ship over to God.
Yeah.
What's that saying? If you want to make God laugh, go ahead and plan.
Yeah. But then that's always something I've kind of wondered too, because, and there's an answer in all of this, but we have to have some sort of agency, because we have to plan to a certain extent, but also how do we, and the best answer I could kind of give is that, that's kind of the reason for prayer, is aligning our intentions and our will and our plans with what God's will and plan is. Because we're going to plan and we're going to have a will one way or another, but the question is, are we aligning it with what God's plan is or not?
And that is difficult for us to accept.
Yeah.
Praying that we are able to discern God's path for us. I don't know about anybody else, but I find that difficult to pray for. It's something that I would like. It's something that I would like to know.
Yeah.
And it's something that I would like to pray for. But when I sit down to pray, that's something that I have difficulty praying for, because it's something that at my time of prayer is not quite foremost in my mind. And I don't know why.
Let's pick kind of a random example. Say you're wanting to go to, you feel that you should go to Norway to preach at a church or something,
Okay.
you know. And you pray to God about being able to go there. You know, God could say yes, because it's in line with what, you know, part of the plan, you know, you're supposed to go there and witness to those Norwegian people, you know, do something over there, you know. God could say no, you know, you're needed here, you know. Or I think there's also sometimes a third way, and that's, you know, sometimes God grants us things. And I was listening to, I was actually came across a video about this, and they use this example, like, you know, if your kid asks you for something, sometimes you just enjoy giving things to your kids. You know, sometimes God enjoys giving stuff to us. It doesn't interfere with God's plan. It doesn't necessarily advance it, but it's just out of God's generosity that, you know, it's something. I don't know. I think that's still possible, but if it's something that would interfere with or take you away in any way from fulfilling, you know, God's plan, that it would be a no, you know.
Sometimes he just lets you have it.
Yeah.
It won't hurt you, but it won't help you.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Maybe that's true with smaller things, but maybe it could be true with.
I can see that happening with larger things because we need to learn a lesson.
Yeah. If you want a house, a certain house, God lets you have it, then, you know,
it teaches you a lesson.
Yeah. Then you realize, oh, I didn't want this house.
Oh, I couldn't afford this house.
Yeah, I couldn't afford it.
Yeah. I think it is a difficult thing. You know, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here, and we need to, you know, this is the kind of faith God wants all of us to have. Absolute certainty of God's presence in our lives.
And what do you make out of them being promoted at the end of this? I find it, I mean, it's a very elegant ending, but it's interesting that we're not given certain details, like what exactly they were saying or doing with, you know, the fourth man in the fire, which we would really want to know, but it lets us know that they were promoted in Babylon after they, you know, it's kind of like I mean, it is true that the people that were plotting against them, that their efforts backfired because they got promoted.
Yeah.
They could have, I mean, this could have gone another way. You know, if they weren't reported to Nebuchadnezzar, maybe nobody would have, you know, if they were standing in the back, nobody would notice because everybody would be bowing down and, you know, I don't know. I mean, Daniel's not, I don't think Daniel would have bowed, but maybe he was standing around with the king somewhere.
He wasn't around here, you know, at the time. Or else he would have certainly been part of this group.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't time for Daniel to be, you know, called up.
Yeah.
They knew Daniel would be up for a test later.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
God knew that the lion test was coming, and
Yeah.
it would be time for Daniel to shine. It was two completely different lessons for people to observe about the God of Israel. Important statements for different crowds of people.
Now, I am kind of wondering, this is just a passing thought, came to me, this whole book of Daniel, there are so many there are some really memorable stories in this book. And usually with these prophets, Daniel's kind of considered a prophet, I guess.
Well, he certainly is.
You usually don't. Not a lot of people know much about Isaiah or Elisha or Elijah. I mean, even though there are some miracles that happen, I keep forgetting which one was fed by the birds. One of them. Is that Elijah? Yeah. But with the book of Daniel, it's very, I mean, in Sunday school, you're taught the book of Daniel, these stories, just because they're good. They're good stories. And
yes,
I mean, they're
are
true, but they're good. Just good stories. I don't know how else to,
They are good, wholesome stories.
Yeah.
They teach good qualities of people and of God.
Yeah.
Some of the other stories about prophets, they teach stuff about prophets and God, but they're a bit more esoteric.
Yeah.
Talking about birds feeding prophets, well, that's nice, and we understand it, but that doesn't grab a 7-year-old very much.
Yeah.
Getting fed by a widow and her son by her food never running out. I mean, she's always at a very minimum of food for a long time, but she never has more than just a day's worth of food. But she always has just enough.
Yeah.
Those are tales that are for adults. They're not for kids. They teach us a lot about God,
Providing in more subtle ways.
Yes, they teach us a lot about God.
Yeah.
But they're not for children.
Yeah. It just struck me that everything in the book of Daniel is just very, even the king Nebuchadnezzar, that when Daniel interprets the dream, he's about to kill all the advisors, and like, I'm gonna, tear you limb from limb and turn your house into a dunghill and bury you under the rubble of your house, and it's like, or you're being torn by lions, or you're thrown into a fire. It's a very dramatic book. I mean, it's a very interesting book, but it's like the good guys, the quote. We're all sinners, but
the good guy always wins.
The good guys win. Even the people that try to get Daniel thrown into the lion's den. Well, that's a little gruesome. They get thrown into the lion's den. With their families, but that's that's kind of not very kid friendly there. But it's.
But a lot of times, the people stop telling the story before that happens.
Yeah.
Um,
All these stories that we're talking about, to me, they all are connected to the one stream of thought. They're designed to authenticate our faith in Jesus, to deepen it, strengthen it, and to refine us.
By fire.
Fire is, yes, it's mentioned, over and over in the Bible. I guess it's the ultimate refinement. One of the refine things, the fire.
Well, that's a good kind of on-ramp to the kind of one of the final questions I had, which was how does this, how does this all point to Jesus, which is, whenever we look at an Old Testament passage, I'm going to try to, I think we usually answer that question, but try to ask that specifically. And of course, this whole idea of kingdoms and, the kingdoms of men and people, and then the kingdom of God, kind of the kingdom of God in this case being invisible, but superior to Babylon and Persia and later Greece and Rome and all these other kingdoms that come and go, and God putting into power and bringing like Nebuchadnezzar's son, bringing him out of power rather quickly, and keeping Daniel around at the same time. And you see this interesting mix of God's sovereignty over everything, but also, they let the exile happen, and that, that still allows Daniel to get thrown into the lion's den. I'm sure that was not comfortable, even though he wasn't eaten by the lion. I'm sure it wasn't comfortable being in the lion's den for all night,
Was it
with the lion.
comfortable for Jonah to be in the whale? I'd rather be in the, I don't know if I'd rather be in the lion's den or the mouth of.
I'd rather be in the lion's den. I think that being in the belly of a whale would be,
Does it sound
Slimy.
yucky here.
Nice.
Joan brought us cookies.
There's been, now that we mentioned her name, she's going to be marked as attending.
Oh, good.
Joan?
Yeah.
Really?
Your name gets, if you're mentioned, you
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
You'll say, did Joan know this?
what Joan doesn't know.
Won't her?
No, I'm just have two.
Ah.
Give one to Nathaniel over. Send one his way.
Away from me before I eat more.
Well, I think a lot of people believe that Jesus didn't show up to the New Testament. But when we look at these stories and dissect them, it's like, oh wow, he was here, he was here, he was here, he was here.
And
They're all wrong.
God with us, that's another theme, because even at the birth of Jesus, this is God with us, And I see that as an important part of this story, with us in the, with us in the fire, with them in exile. Last time we talked about God leaving, and you made note of this, Laurel, that God was going with the people into exile. The exile he was allowing to happen, but he was still willingly going. So I don't know. To me, that kind of also points to the work of Jesus, kind of willingly going, with the people and willingly, well, the cross and everything. That was part of God's plan, but it was also, anyway,
Realizing that God, they didn't understand that was the Messiah, but they could somewhat grasp the Spirit of God being with them at that time in the furnace. And they could testify to that. And as they came out and were among their friends and family, that's something that they would have shared. And the people would have known that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had not deserted them. That God was still among them. And that would have been, I think, important morale boosters for the people. I think that may have been one of the reasons that God permitted the three of them to be thrown into the furnace, was so that they could have been saved and could have shared time with Jesus.
Well, and I guess if you think about it, it's kind of like going to an inaccessible, nobody else could have been in on that time, because you would have to walk into the furnace. So,
That's right.
that's interesting. Or like Moses on Mount Sinai, that
Yeah.
cloud and everything, and nobody wanted to go near it. Of course, everybody wanted to be in on the ask God a question or something, or
Yeah.
but would you go up into the smoky cloud or the fiery furnace?
They would have been afraid.
Yeah.
But realizing that God's presence was still among them, that God had proved his presence was still among them, would have been important for the people.
Yeah.
And that was quite a demonstration. And word of that would have spread, I think, very quickly.
Like
Yeah.
wildfire.
And also is this theme of God being the deliverer, Jesus being the deliverer, the Messiah being the deliverer. And they would eventually be delivered from this exile.
Yes.
And
Of course, they can't know that.
yeah, they're not going to know that right now. But
And most of the ones who would have experienced this would be dead before they.
yeah.
It would have only been their children who would have returned to Israel.
Well, and the same was true for their time in Egypt. I mean, they were there for
400 years. Yeah.
How many generations is that?
A
At
bunch.
least 20. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Right? And applications. Now we'll go over these applications here, but I did want to mention that there's going to be another section after this, after we finish talking about Daniel 3. I wanted to start having a little set, and we'll have a little break after we talk about these, just kind of wrapping things up and how we apply this.
Okay.
We can touch on things next time if we need to.
Sure.
But I was going to try to do a little section of at the end of these, like a special topic.
Okay.
Because Nathaniel had mentioned, we talked briefly about something at the end of last week. and I said I would bring it back.
Okay.
It was a little rabbit trail, but I think we can tie it into what we're talking about. So
Rabbit trails are often very useful.
it was
And
some
often they're just rabbit
philosophical
trails.
concepts. Anyway, philosophical rabbit trail,
Okay.
not theosophical.
Well, they may be.
Or theosophy is like another thing, right? Madam, what's her name? Anyway, how do we apply this to our relationship with God today? You know, certainly we don't have large golden statues. I mean, maybe you do in your house, but we don't. We have brass giraffes, but you know, we have these idols around us, and the idols always look different, but they're always there. You know, anything that competes with our allegiance, you know, and you know, something that pulls us away from God or something that demands us to bow down to it. And these are different things for different people. You know, I mean, they're different. They can often be good things. You know, like resources or relationships, even relationships, I guess, can be idols, right? Certain, you put it above your relationship with God, you're kind of turning the person into an idol.
Yeah.
And you know, our own, I was trying to think of a better way to put this, but our own fiery furnaces that we could find ourselves in. Yeah. Metaphorical fiery furnaces that we might accidentally fall into sometimes. But sometimes we know we're going into one, but sometimes we don't. You know, these times of testing. I guess this is an encouraging story because, you know, it shows that God is with us at all times. You know, it's kind of the big idea here, God with us, and using these times as an opportunity. Another question, what do we value? Do we value the praise of people or God? Not that God is praising us, but do we value what God values, or do we? And sometimes it's nice when we don't have to ask that question, you know, but sometimes you have to decide, you know.
I think most of the time we try not to ask that question.
Yeah.
I think most of the time, if that question is asked, we ask it as silently as possible.
Or even when interacting with the world, you know, I mean, we are in the world too, but not of the world. But you know, the message of love and forgiveness and acceptance is part of the Christian message, but it's not the whole. You know, there might be certain, and here I am doing it. I'm kind of beating around the bush. Certain issues that we try to not talk about, you know, just because it would alienate people or something, you know. It's not, you know, there's a way to do it in a loving way, but
there are
sound like a moralizer, so, you know, like
there are certainly issues that we try not to talk about because it would alienate people. They're some of the most divisive and difficult issues that we run across in our society. You know, how we deal with.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like you're kind of called to be on one side for the I mean, you're kind of called to be, well, I don't want to open too much of a can of worms, but you either accept every single thing we do and endorse it, or but there is a way to show love to people, but at the same time, you don't have to. I guess it is kind of a nuanced truth, that you can still, Jesus still loves people, that Jesus still loved the people selling pigeons in the temple, that he threw the money tables over,
We have to,
I guess that's probably a good illustration of that.
whatever the happening, we want people to know that we still love them, no matter what.
Yeah.
We may have to hate the sin and pray for there to be somehow a difference. But know that we have love for the people involved.
And
a tremendous love for the people involved.
And I guess in the case of this passage in Daniel, it was a little more just the very fact that they stood,
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they were saying to the people that were bowing down, like, hey, what are you doing? Get up,
Right.
They just didn't bow down.
Yes.
So in this case, it was pretty visible. And it's just that is the other question, when it's seeking the wisdom from the Holy Spirit on when to. I mean, we should always stand firm, but when to make a more visible stance, when to not, when to what, because you can't walk around to everybody and be like, hey, but
Well, I think
there got to be opportunities, but at the same time.
Well, I think that gets back to the fact that we have to pray for discernment.
Right.
In that we know that God does love each and every one of the souls that he put on earth. But God hates the sin that people choose to participate in. And there are times when we are provided with an opportunity to address that. And there are times when it is better to not say anything about it.
Now, we don't often think about the people that did bow down to, the masses that did bow down to the statue, just because they didn't know any better. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, maybe they didn't. But...
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, I guess if they were some of the exiles and they knew that, God doesn't want us to bow down to an idol. But what if you're just some Babylonian guy and you.
Well, if you're just some Babylonian guy, it's okay.
Like, hey,
Now,
I want to please the king. Oh, king live forever.
You told us to worship, so I better worship.
Better get down.
But you have the Jews that were taken out in exile.
Well, I guess there were more than just Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Absolutely. It doesn't talk about the balance of the exiles that were taken from Israel and Judah at that time.
Well, it seems like there were a bunch of people taken from a lot of different places that were in this Babylon was kind of a
Oh, yeah,
very cosmopolitan place.
yeah. Everywhere between Judah and Babylon, and that covered a lot of area.
Went all the way to Persia, right? India. The Persian,
Yeah.
the Persian Empire went over into India.
Right.
Did it go into Africa down there?
No,
Am I thinking of Alexander the Great?
you're thinking of Alexander. But
It spanned a wide area.
a very large area. So you would have had a great number of people who didn't know better, but still you would have had a lot of Jews who had to deal with that conflict. You know, should I bow down? You know, here we have these three Jewish guys who are really putting up a pretty big example for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob right here in the middle of everything. And, you know, we're bowing down to this idol just to not have a stink.
Oh, that's my alarm.
Telling you it's
Bear with
almost
me.
time for
My foot is caught under this table. Okay. Hopefully that doesn't showing up on the. I think Zoom probably filters that out, but.
Mhm.
And finally, drum roll,
yes.
opportunity. Seeing, and this is something we mentioned before, but seeing the opportunities in the times when God blesses us in certain ways and things are going well, but also in these times where, you know, you're faced with instances like this, and in the times of trial and challenge. And when I say opportunities to grow and draw closer to God and to, you know, but we mentioned that, you know, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up again just before we close on this. Just on a very practical level, just kind of seeing, you know, because they could have thought, the three could have thought that this was a really terrible thing that was happening to them. And in a way, it is true. They're getting thrown into a furnace, but, you know, hauled before the king. But it was actually a really good thing that happened, because they got to experience God in a way that few people did.
Well, I think it's important but we think about how they felt beforehand.
Yeah.
And think about them beforehand, and think about their friends outside of the immediate group. You know, we know they would have had Jewish friends outside, you know, outside. And here they are. They do take a stand not to do this, and they are condemned for the stand that they take. Now, I have to believe that they were afraid. And that is to some extent reflected in what they said. You know, if, you know, we know our God can save us. But if God doesn't save us, that's okay. We can live, we may die. But if we die, we'll die doing the right things. And that's something that their friends were really afraid of. And that's something that we all should consider, are we afraid of dying? The bulk of their friends were afraid of dying because probably they bowed down. They were afraid. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't.
I heard a so.
Well, when you said they were afraid, you think they were afraid?
The people that bowed down.
No, I mean of going in the furnace. I've always just taken that blindly as, of course not. They knew God would save them, but still, when it comes right down to going in the furnace, that would be.
I don't think they assumed God would save them.
Oh, I always have.
I think they did not know
No.
that God would save them.
Okay. They
Uh,
just knew that they weren't going to bow down to this idol, because that's definitely wrong.
I think they
So-
knew they would be okay
Mhm. Either way,
either way.
even if they perish, that's okay too.
That's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
I think that they did not want to die,
Right.
but if they died, it would be okay. And if they lived, it would be okay.
Okay. So either way, they're okay.
Apprehensive of death?
No.
Yes.
Really?
I think everyone has some degree of the fear of the unknown, an apprehension of the unknown. Like, I don't want to think I'm afraid of death, but it's something about which I don't know. So I guess there's some aspect of fear about that, but I can't honestly say I'm afraid of death. I love God, and I believe that I am okay in His sight. And in the sense of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I'm okay either way.
Okay.
But there's that difference in familiarity of where I am and complete lack of familiarity of someplace else.
But some days I get to the point where anything's going to be better than this.
Wake up. I really can't wait to go to heaven.
And being kind of devil's advocate, no pun intended. But and if there's not a heaven, it's okay too. This is it. I'm okay. I sure hope there's a heaven, but that's
I
my
believe
faith,
there definitely is. It's always been a part of my upbringing.
and that's part of my. Yeah.
And I don't even think of that possibility, but I suffer with major depression. So a lot of times I just can't wait to go home.
Yeah, that's why I said anything's better than this. So there's just days where it's like, come on, Lord,
No leaky
take
pipes.
me home. Do what?
That's
No
right.
leaky pipes.
There's no leaky pipes. There's no mean people out there.
That's right.
I mean, I've just felt like I've had my fill of nice people.
Certainly not here.
One in particular.
We'll definitely pray for that.
Yeah, I pray for him all the time.
That concludes our discussion of Daniel 3. The time is drawing nigh.